All right, so today we're going to be learning, I'm going to address everybody right now, we're going to learn how to do a chiffonade cut and a little bit of knife skills. We're going to talk about more what that means, a little bit more going forward. But so for you today, kind of a quick little layout of what we're going to do is we're going to make something called a chiffonade cut, which I will show you in a second. But then I'm also going to show you kind of some general knife skills and kind of help you not cut yourself when you're using a knife. Because ultimately, I've done it a time or two and don't recommend it. Chiffonade cut is essentially like just a basic cut that you'll see in like a lot of restaurants, things like that, and it usually creates strips of like an herb. It commonly uses basil to just like give little strips. So starting off with I'll show you kind of quick demo of what it's going to look like, and then we'll talk through some basics and then go from there. What I will say today is I'm going to walk you through some stuff, we'll do some stuff together, and then I'm going to have you do it on your own and just show me what you've learned. So starting off with what you'll do is I got about 5 pieces of basil here. You're gonna roll them up like so. You're essentially just making a little, a little log, little roll, whatever you want to call it. Then tucking that in right here. And then you do something called a claw grip. So you put your fingers essentially in a little claw position, rest the blade of your knife right against it. And then you're essentially just gonna slowly rock the knife forward and backwards, leaving it resting against your fingers here. And what this allows is for the knife to never get to the point where it could cut you, because it's always in contact with your fingers there, so you're never letting the edge of the blade actually get to your fingertips.
Okay.
So when you're done with that, you get these fun little strips of basil that you can use as like a garnish, something like that. In this instance, we're using basil, but you can use pretty much anything if you want to be fancy. So that's the basic rundown of it. A little bit of knife skills. So at home, generally, what do you know about knife skills? Like, how often do you use a knife? What do you kind of do? And yeah.
I learned how to mince and dice a bell pepper and an onion when I was working in a kitchen in undergrad. Other than that, I feel like my knife skills are not as efficient as they could be. It takes me a while if I'm chopping a potato or something like that. I feel like the process of cooking dinner always takes a little longer than I'd like it to.
Okay. Do you feel like it's something where you like almost like cut yourself often, or do you?
I have a couple of fun scars on my fingers. So slow and cautious is kind of the name of my game.
Okay, I like it. Slow and cautious is good.
But this is something new to me, the claw grip.
Okay. Well, we're gonna work on it. So basically I'm gonna walk you through a couple of different things, a little bit of some safety knowledge, and then we'll kind of go forward from there. Okay. So like I said, this is a chiffonade cut. This is what we're gonna go with today, but there's a bunch of different cuts you can do, and it all just depends what you want to use it for. What I will say, starting with safety, because there's a few things that we want to talk about safety before we even get started. And a lot of it comes down to your knife. One thing that's kind of a misconception with knives is actually the sharper the knife, the less likely you are to get cut.
Okay.
So if you have a really dull knife, it's actually really easy for it to slip off and then go into your finger or something like that, versus if you have a knife that's going to cleanly cut through everything, you're never worried about it going where you don't expect it to go. So you always can control it that way. So one thing that they talk about a lot is sharpen your knife early, sharpen it often. Most people will have a little knife sharpener in their house, and that works perfectly. But you can also think about like if you have a higher quality knife, it's going to last a little bit longer. So usually say at least sharpen your knife once a month. Yeah. But not going to be testing you on that, it's just a nice thing to know.
I have an IKEA knife that I don't remember the last time I sharpened, but that's my kitchen basic. It is not.
Maybe something to think about at home. But then also something to think about is what are you cutting on? So a lot of times you see in kitchens, things like that,
Plastic.
A lot of times in kitchens they'll have a wood cutting board. Yeah. The reason behind that is it's actually a lot more gentle on your knife, and it's much less likely to dull it as quickly. So something like this, which is a plastic one, versus a big wood one, it's actually just a lot more likely to keep your knife sharp, keep you from hurting yourself. But there is also some stuff to do with like cleanliness of wood ones. Like if you're cutting meats, don't do that. Do it on plastic.
Do meat on plastic. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so that's the general idea. So now I'm going to show you a little bit of what does the actual knife cutting look like. So like we talked about before, let's just kind of try to practice that claw grip. So it kind of comes like so, and then if you're thinking about coming down, you're resting your fingers gently like this. Perfect. So now let's go ahead and grab our knife.
Your nails underneath you, or are you just on the tips of your fingers?
It's kind of a personal preference. It might come down to how long your nails are.
No.
Not long. So for me, I'm not on my fingers like this. I actually want my fingers kind of curled underneath like this, so that when I have my knife, it's sitting kind of against my like middle phalanx, rather than getting into my distal there. So then, if I grab my knife, let it come up and rest right against your fingers right there. And let it just sit there for a second now. What we're gonna work on now is let's pull the hand away. We're gonna work on that little motion. So essentially when you're thinking about cutting, what you're gonna do is you're going to push down and then drive forward. And then you're gonna basically rock on the front of the knife. So it's push and then rock. Yeah. And then almost think about like slicing through whatever you're doing. So you're driving forward and then rocking back. Yeah, perfect. Okay. So that's the general motion that we go with here. There is some people who like to do it backwards, where they like to pull back and rock, push forward. Either way works. It's kind of whatever. If that feels
coordination
weird, that one feels weird to you, then don't do it.
Just gonna stick with the forward.
But now let's do the same thing,
okay,
but with that finger position. So that little claw grip, let that blade just rest right against your fingers and just stay in place for a second. Just easy little rocks. Notice how the blade is never gonna get into your fingers. It's always staying a little bit separated and nice and easy. So now if you want to move, essentially what you'll do is you'll just slowly move this hand back and keep pressure. And then this is whatever speed you want, like you talked about before, slow and steady is perfect. Okay. But it's just that rock, you always come back to this regardless of what you're cutting. Just makes it easy, and then eventually you can just cruise through it.
Okay.
So a little practice here, we're gonna go forward with this again, but we're gonna do it with a onion. The reason I wanna do with this is it's similar consistency to basil, but it's a lot easier. You don't have to worry about holding it, and it's just gonna stay in place. So I'm gonna have you have that exact same setup. Your fingers are just gonna lightly rest on this. It doesn't need to be a death grip down. It's just enough to hold it in position. And then same exact thing, letting that rest against your fingers and slowly rocking forward.
Having a hard time keeping my fingers flexed.
So one thing that can help me a little bit is almost think about grabbing whatever you're cutting with your pinky and your thumb, and then let the other ones just lightly hold. And then every time you cut, you're kind of shifting your hand and slowly shifting down.
That helps.
Perfect. That looks great. So we get our nice little
Smells
even.
Good.
Yeah, we do love.
Till I'm hungry.
We do love some green onion. So good. But yeah, so you get nice even cuts, and this is just an easy way you can just do a little garnish for green onion as well. But that's not what we're looking at. So now we're gonna try that same thing, but we're gonna throw in some basil in there. So give you a little basil leaf here. Good one for myself. So for this, essentially what I'm gonna have you do, we're gonna set up the exact same thing we just did with the green onion with the basil leaf. Okay. Like I said in the original intro, I kind of did this with 5, but we're gonna start with 1. So all we're gonna do, we're just gonna roll this up into a nice little log. So essentially your end result is you're looking for something that looks almost the exact same as that green onion, but it's just a leaf.
Okay. And then tuck the little tail under.
Yeah, tuck the little tail under, makes it so it doesn't unfold. And then exact same setup. Hand's gonna rest right on top, fingers right holding it down, and then just rocking that knife nice and easy coming through, and then slowly shifting your hand down as you come through it. By the time you get to the end, you might lose the last little bit, and that's okay. But then, when you get it, you get those nice little strips. You can use a garnish, you can just eat it, I don't know, whatever you feel like doing. But that's the general setup of it. So we kind of walked through knife skills. We kind of walked through like what is that actually there for? How can we keep it safe? What questions do you have right now?
How did you decide to roll the leaf kind of like long way versus the short way?
Yeah, so it's actually kind of a bit of a personal preference. So what I would say is like if you're going and rolling it the long way, what you're gonna get is a lot of short strips. So like so versus how we did it before. You're gonna get a lot of very short strips. So if I just quickly drop through this, what you're gonna get is a little bit of some strips that are a little bit shorter.
It's a little different from what we have here.
And not gonna be, and it's kind of a personal preference. I just like this better. I think it looks better, but I don't think it's ultimately going to change anything for you. Yeah, and the setup of it's going to be the exact same. It's just a matter of which way you want to do it. I also think the other way you don't have to cut as much, so sometimes that can be really nice for just a time thing.
Yeah.
Do you have any other questions?
Does size of knife matter?
No. Well, no.
Okay.
I'm gonna say that with the caveat of use the knife that is comfortable for you.
Small little hands.
So like something like this is a giant freaking
That
knife.
is yeah.
And when I first got it, I actually really struggled with it because it was so big and I had to learn how to use it. Versus,
Can I feel how heavy it is in comparison?
it's actually a little lighter.
Yeah.
But it's a giant chef's knife. Unfortunately, it's seen better days, but essentially, like, it's kind of a use what is comfortable for you. It's really one of those things of like, they have long ones, they have short ones, they have really long ones, they have really short ones, and there's not really a change between them. Some people will probably argue that there is, but it's just a matter of preference. If you have one that you like can't control, like it's so long that you feel like you're like losing it, that's where I would say like that's gonna change.
Okay.
But something that you're like, yeah, you know what, this just feels comfortable, feels like an extension of your hand, and I would just say
So I use this maybe like the blade is maybe 3/4 of the size of this one.
Yeah.
And it feels like the perfect length for me, but sometimes.
Yeah, and it's what works best for you. Sometimes with a shorter knife, it can be hard to get that same motion just because it's smaller.
Yeah.
And you have less room here essentially to like clear your hand. But ultimately, you can still do the same thing. Okay. So what I'm gonna have you do, kind of our assessment, just to see what you've learned. I'm gonna have you grab 5-ish basil leaves, and I'm just gonna have you show me what we did. I want you focusing on hand position, that rocking motion, and then how I'm gonna grade you is basically what did we get as the end result of, did we find those little even cut basil leaves? And we're just gonna see how you do.
Okay.
Is there any last questions you have before we get into that?
Good. Not bleed.
Not bleed. It's not a question, but I like it.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna layer these leaves on top, one another, and I don't think large to small really matters. I'm going to go long way, which is this way. Yeah. So I'll roll it up nice and tight. Similar width to that green onion, although this one looks a little larger, but I also have like 5 or 6 leaves in there. Tuck the tail under. Make sure to flex and rest against and scoot forward. Cutting board is moving.
Yeah, this is not a great table for this.
Thank you.
But yeah,
It looks like little roses.
Yeah, that looks awesome. That was so good.
It smells so good.
I love basil.
Oh,
yeah. So, what I'm looking
Cool.
for, you did a great job of the rocking motion. You kept your hands always in a good position. Some points you kind of like got out here, but then
like
you came back in.
I'm trying to, my hand just wants to get.
It was also kind of fighting against you with the board moving, so
Yeah.
sometimes it's kind of like hard when you don't have one that's super stable. That's where sometimes you'll see people who have like these like massive like 3-foot cutting boards that will just never move.
Yeah, or in kitchens they have those white like cutting board countertops
Yep.
basically. That,
Yep, exactly. But yeah, you did great, and I'd say you passed my examination for it.
Woohoo!